The sound of a basketball hitting asphalt is, in my humble opinion, the sound of the American dream. Thump, thump, swish. It is a rhythmic, percussive heartbeat that signals a Saturday afternoon where the emails have finally stopped, the lawn is striped to perfection, and for a fleeting moment you aren't Jack, senior logistics coordinator. You are just a dad trying to teach his 12-year-old son that banking a shot off the backboard isn't cheating, it's geometry. "Call it," I said, spinning the orange Wilson ball on my index finger. It wobbled, threatening to fall, much like my dignity if I missed this next shot. "Top of the key. Nothing but net. If I make this, you have to clean the garage." Leo, my son, wiped a smear of sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist. He was at that age where his limbs were growing faster than his coordination, leaving him in a perpetual state of lanky awkwardness. He grinned, revealing a mouth full of expensive orthodontics. "And if you miss?" "If I miss," I said, bending my knees, locking my eyes on the rim, "we get slushies, the big ones, the ones that turn your tongue blue for 3 days." "Deal," Leo said, stepping back. "But you're gonna miss. I saw your form on that last layup. It was tragic, Dad, truly tragic." "Tragic. I'll show you tragic." I lined up the shot. The sun was beating down on our driveway in the pristine, manicured purgatory known as Oak Bridge Estates. It was a beautiful day, aggressively beautiful. The sky was a piercing, unblemished blue. The birds were singing in a way that suggested they were on the payroll. The azaleas were blooming in perfect synchronization. I took a deep breath, smelling the scent of fresh mulch and charcoal from someone's grill 3 houses down. I released the ball. It arced through the air, a perfect parabola of hope. Clang. It hit the front of the rim with the grace of a falling anvil, bounced high into the air, and ricocheted directly into the manicured bed of hostas by the front porch. "Slushy time!" Leo threw his arms up like he'd just won the NBA Finals. "Wind," I muttered, staring at the hoop in betrayal. "Definitely a rogue gust of wind, microburst, very dangerous." "Dad, the trees aren't even moving." "That's how they get you, Leo. Invisible wind. It's a silent killer." I walked over to retrieve the ball, dusting off a crushed hosta leaf. I looked back at the hoop. It was a beauty. I'd bought it at Costco the day before, a silverback 60-inch portable. It had a glass backboard, a breakaway rim, and a base filled with 40 gallons of water. It was heavy, sturdy, and currently the source of my greatest joy. "Check ball," I said, tossing it back to Leo. He caught it, dribbled twice between his legs, show off, and prepared to shoot. But he froze. He lowered the ball, his eyes fixing on something over my shoulder. His smile vanished. "Dad," he whispered, the joy draining from his voice. "The clipboard." I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I didn't need to turn around to know what he was talking about. I knew the sound. Click-clack, click-clack. It was the rhythmic, predatory sound of sensible heels on pavement, the sound of authority, the sound of judgment. I turned slowly. Coming down the sidewalk was Brenda. Brenda Halloway was the president of the Oak Bridge Estates Homeowners Association. She was a woman who didn't just live in the neighborhood, she patrolled it. She wore floral blouses that looked like they were upholstered from a 19th century sofa, and her hair was sprayed into a helmet of blonde defiance that could withstand a Category 5 hurricane. But it was the walk that gave her away. She didn't stroll. She marched. She marched with the righteous indignation of a woman who believes that a blade of grass exceeding 2 inches is a personal affront to God Himself. And in her hand, she clutched the source of her power, the clipboard. "Don't look her in the eyes," I whispered to Leo out of the side of my mouth. "Just keep dribbling, act natural." She's stopping, Leo hissed. Brenda had indeed stopped. She paused exactly at the edge of my property line, her toes mere inches from the invisible barrier that separated public sidewalk from Jack's driveway. She adjusted her rimless glasses. She looked at the grass. She looked at the mailbox. And then, her gaze locked onto the basketball hoop like a heat-seeking missile acquiring a target. "Afternoon, Brenda," I called out, forcing a smile onto my face. It was the suburban dad smile. Tight, polite, and entirely fake. "Beautiful Saturday, isn't it? The petunias are really popping this week." Brenda didn't smile. Brenda didn't do small talk. Small talk was inefficient. Small talk didn't maintain property values. "Jack," she said. Her voice was dry, like leaves being crushed underfoot. "We need to have a conversation about the apparatus." She pointed a pen at the hoop. I walked down the driveway, wiping my hands on my gym shorts. I stopped a safe distance away, about 10 feet. You didn't get too close to Brenda. She could smell fear, and possibly non-compliant fertilizer. "The apparatus?" I repeated, playing dumb. "You mean the hoop? Just shooting some hoops with the kid. Trying to get some exercise before the burgers go on the grill?" Brenda tapped her pen against the clipboard. Tap, tap, tap. It was a slow, deliberate sound. "Jack, I am looking at Article 4, Section 9 of the Oak Ridge Community Standards and Covenants, specifically the clause regarding recreational equipment and structures." I sighed internally. Of course she was. Most people spent their Saturday mornings watching cartoons or sleeping in. Brenda spent hers memorizing Article 4. "It's portable, Brenda," I said, keeping my tone light. "It's on wheels, see? I can move it. It's not a permanent structure. I'm not pouring concrete. It's basically a large toy." "The portability of the violation does not negate the violation," she recited, as if reading from a sacred scroll. "The bylaws state that no recreational equipment exceeding 6 feet in height shall be visible from the primary street frontage. That structure is clearly visible. It is an eyesore." "An eyesore?" I laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "Brenda, come on. It's a basketball hoop. It's Americana. It's practically a requirement for a driveway. Half the driveways in the state have one." "Not in Oak Ridge," she snapped. "We are a premier community. Uniformity is the key to value. If I allow you to keep this monstrosity, then the Johnsons will want a trampoline in their front yard. The Millers will want to park their camper van in the driveway. It is a slippery slope, Jack. And at the bottom of that slope is a trailer park." I looked back at Leo. He was holding the ball, looking anxious. He shouldn't have to deal with this. He was 12. He should be worrying about math tests and whether his crush liked him back, not about the aesthetic rigidity of a neighborhood dictator. "Brenda," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming a little firmer. "We've lived here for 4 years. I pay my dues on time. I mow my lawn every Thursday. I pressure wash the siding. I'm a good resident. Can we just be reasonable? I'll pull it up by the garage when we're done. It won't be near the street." "Reasonable?" Brenda looked at me with genuine confusion, as if I had asked her to speak Aramaic. "The rules are the rules, Jack. They exist for a reason. They protect us. They protect your investment." She scribbled something on her paper. The scratching sound of the pen was incredibly loud in the quiet street. "Furthermore," she continued, "there is the issue of the noise." "The noise?" "The repetitive thumping," she said, wincing slightly. "It is psychological warfare, Jack. Thump, thump, thump. It echoes. I have already received 2 text messages from concerned neighbors asking if there is construction going on." "Construction? It's a rubber ball hitting asphalt. Who texted you? Was it Jerry? Jerry uses a leaf blower at 7 a.m. on Sundays, Brenda. That's louder than a basketball." "Jerry has a permit for landscape maintenance," she replied smoothly. You do not have a permit for a sports arena." "A sports arena? It's a driveway." "It is a violation," she said, finalizing her note with a sharp dot. She ripped the pink carbon copy from her clipboard and held it out to me. Her hand was steady. Her nails were manicured, a pale, bloodless beige. I stared at the slip of paper. "What is this?" "This is a verbal warning, documented in writing," she said. "You have 24 hours to remove the apparatus from view. That means it must be stored inside the garage or in the backyard behind a privacy fence. If it is seen from the street after 12 p.m. tomorrow, fines will be assessed." I didn't take the paper. I folded my arms. "And if I don't move it? My garage is full. I have a workbench in there. It won't fit." Brenda smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just cornered a seal. "Then you will be fined, Jack. $100 for the first infraction. And if it remains, the board has the authority to escalate the fines daily. We can place a lien on your property. We can foreclose. Read your bylaws." She dropped the pink slip on the driveway at my feet. It fluttered gently to the ground, landing on a crack in the asphalt. "Have a blessed day, Jack," she said. She turned on her heel, click-clack, and marched away, heading toward the next house on her list, probably to measure the height of their hedges with a laser rangefinder. I stood there for a long time, staring at the pink slip of paper. My heart was hammering in my chest. It wasn't fear, it was rage. Pure, unadulterated, white-hot rage. It started in my stomach and worked its way up to my throat, tasting like copper. "Dad?" Leo's voice was small. I shook my head, snapping out of the trance. I bent down and picked up the paper. "Violation. Unauthorized structure. Corrective action, immediate removal." I crumpled it into a ball. "Is she going to take the hoop?" Leo asked, walking down the driveway. "No," I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "She's not taking anything." "But she said—" "I don't care what she said," I interrupted, perhaps a little too sharply. I softened my tone. She's just being Brenda. Don't worry about it, buddy. Let's play." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Check ball." We played for another hour, but the magic was gone. Every time the ball hit the ground, thump, I winced, waiting for a police siren or a SWAT team. Every time I looked at the street, I expected to see Brenda peering out from behind a bush with binoculars. The joy had been sucked out of the afternoon, replaced by a low-level anxiety that vibrated in my teeth. Eventually, Leo missed a shot and sighed. "I'm tired. Can we get those slushies now?" "Yeah," I said, staring at Brenda's house down the street. Her curtains were drawn. "Let's get out of here." I didn't move the hoop. I left it right there, standing tall and proud at the top of the driveway. A silent sentinel of defiance. Sunday came and went. I spent the day doing yard work, purposely using the weed whacker for longer than necessary, channeling my aggression into decapitating dandelions. I saw Brenda drive by once in her beige sedan. She slowed down as she passed my house. She looked at the hoop. She looked at me. I waved, holding the weed whacker like a flamethrower. She didn't wave back. She just wrote something on a notepad mounted to her dashboard and drove on. Monday morning, I went to work. I sat in meetings about supply chain logistics, nodding at spreadsheets while my mind was back at 124 Oakview Lane. I was distracted. I was irritable. When a vendor told me a shipment would be late, I almost snapped, "Is it because of the HOA?" which would have been confusing for everyone involved. I got home at 5:30 p.m. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the neighborhood. I pulled into the driveway, maneuvering around the hoop. It was still there. Nobody had stolen it. Nobody had set it on fire. I felt a surge of relief. Maybe she was bluffing? Maybe she realized how insane she sounded. I walked to the mailbox. It was stuffed. Junk mail. Bills. A catalog for patio furniture. And then, at the very bottom, buried like a landmine, was an envelope. It was thick. It was cream-colored. It had the Oakbridge Estates crest embossed in gold foil in the upper left corner. The paper felt heavy, expensive. It felt like a summons. I didn't open it outside. I walked into the house, tossed my keys on the granite island, and greeted Sarah. She was chopping vegetables for dinner. "Hey," she said, looking up. "You look tense. Rough day?" You could say that. I held up the envelope. Sarah put down the knife. "Is that from her?" "It's from the board," I said, using air quotes. "Which is just Brenda and her 2 puppets." I ripped the envelope open. Inside was a formal letter, printed on heavy bond paper, and an invoice. Notice of violation and assessment of fines. Dear Homeowner, pursuant to the warning issued verbally on Saturday, October 12th, a reinspection of your property was conducted at 12:01 p.m. on Sunday, October 13th, and again at 8 a.m. on Monday, October 14th. Violation: unauthorized recreational structure, Article 4, Section 9. Status: unresolved. Flagrant disregard. The board takes the aesthetic integrity of Oakbridge Estates very seriously. Your refusal to comply with the verbal warning has been noted as willful non-compliance. As per the bylaws, a fine of $100 has been assessed for the initial violation. Furthermore, due to the flagrant nature, Section 11, Paragraph B, of your refusal to remove the structure, the board has voted to accelerate the fine schedule. Current balance: due $500 daily. Recurring fine $100, 00 day until the structure is removed. Please note, failure to pay fines within 30 days will result in a lien being placed against the property. The association reserves the right to foreclose on the lien to recover costs, legal fees, and interest. Sincerely, Brenda Halloway, President, Oakbridge Estates HOA. I read it twice. I read it a third time, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. $500, I whispered. My voice sounded strange, detached. What? Sarah wiped her hands on a towel and snatched the letter from me. She scanned it, her eyes widening. $500? Jack, this is insane. For 2 days. And a lien? They're threatening to take the house? They're threatening to take the house, I repeated. Because of a basketball hoop. We have to take it down, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. Jack, we can't afford this. $100 a day? That's $3,000 a month. That's more than the mortgage. I looked at Sarah. I looked at the letter. I looked out the kitchen window at the hoop, standing there in the twilight. It looked lonely. It looked innocent. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a man who has played by the rules his entire life. Paid his taxes, obeyed the speed limit, recycled his plastics, finally deciding that the social contract had been breached. No, I said. Jack, please, just move it to the backyard. Leo won't mind. We can't fight them. They have lawyers. They have a budget. I don't care if they have the National Guard, I said, walking over to the fridge and grabbing a beer. I didn't want a beer. I needed something to hold. I'm not paying them a dime. And I'm not moving that hoop. So, what are you going to do? Let them foreclose? No. I took a long pull of the beer. I'm going to find a way out. Brenda quoted the bylaws. She loves the bylaws. She thinks the rules are her shield. I walked toward my office. The letter crumpled in my fist. Where are you going? Sarah asked. I'm going to do some reading, I said, pausing at the doorway. A dark smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. Brenda made a mistake, Sarah. What mistake? She assumes I have better things to do than destroy her. I went into my office and closed the door. I sat down at my desk, the 3 monitors glowing in the dark room. I cracked my knuckles. I opened a browser. Search. Oakbridge Estates. Master Plat. Map. 1998. Search. County Land Records. Easements. Search Municipal Zoning Code. Definition of public thoroughfare. I wasn't Jack the logistics manager anymore. I was Jack the Avenger. And I was about to go down a rabbit hole so deep, so petty, and so bureaucratically complex that Brenda wouldn't even see the bottom until she hit it. The night was young, the coffee was brewing, and the war had just begun. The blue light of 3 computer monitors bathed my face in a sickly, radioactive glow. It was 3:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional settling groan of the floorboards. Or maybe that was just the sound of my property value plummeting under the weight of Brenda's wrath. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand. I had consumed enough coffee to kill a Clydesdale. And my browser history looked like the manifesto of a lunatic obsessed with municipal zoning codes. Article 4, Section 9, Recreational Structures. Visible from the street. I muttered the words aloud, testing them, tasting the bitterness of their vague tyranny. I had read the Oakbridge Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC and Rs, 4 times. It was a document written by lawyers who hated joy, designed to ensure that every house looked exactly the same, like a dystopian Stepford commune. I highlighted the phrase, located on private residential lots. That was the key. The HOA's power was absolute, but it was geographically limited. They were kings of the castle, but their kingdom stopped at the property line. They couldn't find me for a hoop parked on the moon. They couldn't find me for a hoop parked in the next county. I pulled up the county tax map for the 50th time. My lot, parcel 12B, was a rectangle of suburban normalcy, but there was something bothering me about the geometry of it. I zoomed in. I toggled the historic layers view on the GIS mapping tool, a feature I didn't know existed until 3 hours ago. I went back to 1998, the year the subdivision was platted. There it was, a faint, dashed line cutting across the bottom 30 feet of my driveway. It was labeled Easement B4, Future Row. Right of way, I whispered. I opened a new tab. I searched Easement B4 Oakbridge Development Plan 1998. I found a scanned PDF of the original developer's proposal. It took 10 minutes to download because the county server was apparently powered by a hamster on a wheel. When it finally popped open, I saw the vision. The developer, a company called Premier Living LLC, which had spectacularly imploded during the 2008 crash, had intended for my street to continue. They wanted to build a bridge over the creek behind my house and connect Oakview Lane to the massive subdivision on the other side. To do that, they had dedicated a strip of the land, my driveway's apron, as a future public road. But the bridge was never built. The company went bankrupt. The other subdivision was built by a different developer who put up a privacy wall instead of a road. So the road to nowhere remained. Nowhere. But here was the kicker. I dug into the dissolution papers of Premier Living LLC. When they went belly up, they forfeited all their unimproved assets to the municipality to settle back taxes. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking loudly. My driveway wasn't my driveway. Well, the top part was, the garage was, but the bottom 30 feet, the part that touched the street, the part where the hoop stood, was sitting on land that was technically, legally, and bureaucratically an abandoned city street. It was a ghost road. The HOA governed private lots. They did not govern city streets. A slow, terrifying smile spread across my face. It was the kind of smile that usually precedes a villain monologuing about world domination. If that strip of asphalt was public property, Brenda had as much authority over it as she did over the interstate highway system, which was to say, zero. But there was a catch. Currently, it looked private. It acted private. To the naked eye, and to the casual observer, it was just Jack's driveway. To make this stick, to really, truly make this stick, I couldn't just hold up a map and scream sanctuary. I needed the city to acknowledge it. I needed them to accept the road. I looked at the clock. 4 a.m. "Sarah," I whispered to the empty room, "I'm not going to work tomorrow." I slept for 2 hours, fueled by spite-induced adrenaline. When I woke up, I put on my suit. Not my "I'm going to sit in a cubicle" suit, but my "I am a disgruntled taxpayer who demands answers" suit. It was charcoal gray. I paired it with a power tie. "You're not going to the office?" Sarah asked, sipping her tea as I marched into the kitchen. She eyed the dark circles under my eyes. "I have a meeting downtown," I said, grabbing a piece of toast. "With who?" "With Destiny," I said, "and the Department of Planning and Zoning." "Jack, please don't get arrested." "I can't promise that." I kissed her on the forehead and walked out. I stopped in the driveway. The hoop was still there. The fine was still looming. I patted the metal pole affectionately. "Don't worry, buddy. Papa's going to get you a green card." City Hall was a brutalist concrete block built in the 1970s, designed to crush the human spirit through architecture alone. It smelled of floor wax, stale donuts, and the damp wool of cheap suits. I walked through the metal detector, ignoring the bored security guard who was watching TikToks on his phone, and found the directory. Department of Planning, Zoning, and Urban Development, basement level. Of course it was in the basement. I took the elevator down. The doors opened to a windowless room painted a color that could only be described as bureaucracy beige. There were rows of plastic chairs bolted to the floor. There was a ticket machine. I pulled a ticket. Number 47. I looked at the red LED display above the counter. Now serving 12. I sat down. I waited. Time moves differently in the Department of Planning. It's not linear. It loops and stretches. I watched a man argue with a clerk about the placement of a septic tank for 45 minutes. I watched a woman try to explain that her tiny home was actually a mobile artistic installation. I waited 3 hours. I read old magazines about asphalt density. I checked my email and saw a reminder from Brenda. Day 3 of violation. Fine increases to $600 at noon. I grinned. Let it increase. Let it hit 1 million. Number 47! The voice cracked over the intercom like a whip. I shot up and walked to window 3. Behind the bulletproof glass sat a man who looked like he had been eroded by the tides of paperwork. He was wearing a short-sleeved dress shirt with a coffee stain on the pocket. His name tag, crooked and hanging by a single pin, read, Stan. Stan had a mustache that drooped with the weight of 1,000 denied permits. He didn't look up as I approached. He was aggressively typing on a keyboard that sounded like it was made of gravel. "Help you?" Stan grunted. "Hi, Stan. My name is Jack. I have a question about a historic easement and a potential 88B dedication." Stan stopped typing. He looked up. His eyes were watery and bloodshot, framed by bags deep enough to carry groceries. "You a developer?" "No." "You a lawyer?" "No." "Then you're lost." "Residential complaints are on the 2nd floor." "I'm not complaining," I said, leaning in close to the speaking slit in the glass. "I want to give you something. I want to donate land to the city." Stan blinked. This was clearly not a sentence he heard often. Donate? We don't want your land. We can barely mow the parks we have. Is it a brownfield, toxic waste? If there's oil drums buried on it, it's federal, not us. It's pristine, I said. It's a paved 30-foot strip of asphalt. And technically, you already own the rights to it. I just want to formalize the improvement. I slid the folder under the glass. Parcel 12B, Oakbridge Estates, the Ghost Road. Stan sighed. A long, rattling sound that involved his entire upper body. He opened the folder. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the 1998 map. He looked at the county tax record I had printed out. He traced the dotted line with a thick, calloused finger. Premier Living LLC, Stan muttered. I remember those crooks. Left half the drainage ditches in Phase 1 unfinished. Cost us a fortune in 09. Exactly, I said. They left this strip as a future right-of-way. It connects to nothing. It sits on my driveway, but it's legally designated for public use. Stan looked at me, suspicion narrowing his eyes. So, why do you care? If it's on your driveway, just use it. We aren't going to enforce a road that goes nowhere. I have a situation, I said carefully. My homeowners association. Stan's face changed. The boredom vanished, replaced by a flicker of something dark and ancient. HOA? He spat the word out like a curse. Yes, the Oakbridge HOA. President Brenda Holloway. Stan flinched. Holloway. I know that woman. She filed a Freedom of Information Act request last year to find out how much the city spends on unsightly traffic cones. She calls this office once a week to report potholes that don't exist. She's trying to fine me, I said, dropping the bomb. For a basketball hoop, on my driveway. She says it's an unauthorized structure on a private lot. Stan leaned back in his chair. The gears were turning. I could see the dusty machinery of his mind kicking into gear. But, I continued, if the city were to accept the dedication of easement B4, and if I were to, say, fund the improvement of said easement into a public micropark, then it wouldn't be a private lot anymore, would it? It would be city property. And the HOA has no jurisdiction over city property. Stan finished the sentence. A slow, dry smile spread across his face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had found a new weapon in an old war. Precisely, I said. Stan tapped the map. You know what this entails, right? If you trigger the dedication, you lose the land. Fee simple title transfers to the municipality. You can't park your car there anymore unless it's street legal. You can't build a fence. Random people can walk on it. I'm counting on it, I said. I want to donate it as a public thoroughfare and recreation area. Stan chuckled. Recreation area? You mean a basketball court? A public basketball court, open to all citizens, maintained by, well, I'll maintain it. I'll sign a volunteer caretaker agreement. Stan typed something into his computer. You'd need to bring it up to code. Public use requires safety markings, signage, hours of operation. You'd have to file Form 88B, Voluntary Improvement of Public Right-of-Way. Usually developers do this to get tax write-offs. I've never seen a homeowner do it just to screw over a neighbor. It's worth it, I said. Can we fast-track it? Stan looked at his screen. The city council meets on Thursday evening. The consent agenda is usually rubber-stamped. They don't read the small items. If I classify this as a no-cost infrastructure acquisition, they'll vote yes just to get to the buffet. He looked at me. You have to pay for the paint and the sign. The city is broke. Done. And, Stan added, lowering his voice, you have to promise me one thing. Anything. When Brenda finds out, I want you to tell me exactly what her face looks like. Stan, I said, extending my hand through the slot. I'll take a picture. He printed out a stack of forms that was an inch thick. Get these signed. You need a licensed contractor to verify the surface integrity. You need a diagram of the improvements. Bring it back to me by 5 p.m. tomorrow. I grabbed the stack. You're a lifesaver, Stan. No, Stan grunted, turning back to his typing. I'm just a petty bureaucrat with a grudge. Now get out of here before I change my mind. I walked out of City Hall feeling like I had just robbed a bank. But legally, I had the paperwork. I had the inside man. Now I needed the muscle. I needed a contractor who could turn a driveway into a public park in 48 hours, and who wouldn't ask too many questions about why I was painting yellow lines on my own property. I sat in my car in the parking garage and pulled up Yelp. I skipped past the 5-star reviews with photos of pristine patios and elegant stonework. I was looking for something else. I was looking for 3 stars. I was looking for a guy who got the job done, maybe swore a little too much, and had a truck that looked like it had been through a war zone. I found him on the 3rd page. Big Mike's Paving and Excavation. Review. Mike is loud and his truck leaks oil, but he dug my septic tank in the rain on Christmas Eve. 5 stars for effort, 1 star for language. Perfect. I dialed the number. Yeah? A voice answered. It sounded like a cement mixer gargling gravel. Is this Big Mike? Depends who's asking. I ain't paying alimony until the judge says so. I'm not a lawyer, Mike. I'm a guy who needs a driveway turned into a city street, and I need a basketball hoop installed with enough concrete to survive a nuclear blast. Cash job. There was a pause on the line. I'm listening? I need it done fast, and I need it to be loud. It's a spite project against an HOA. I heard a deep, rumbling sound. It took me a second to realize it was laughter. Buddy, Mike said, you just said the magic words. Send me the address. I'll bring the jackhammer. I drove home with the windows down, the wind in my hair. I felt dangerous. I pulled into the driveway. The hoop was still there. I got out and walked to the mailbox. Another letter from Brenda. Second notice. Fine assessment, $600. I didn't even open it. I walked to the hoop. I patted the backboard. Enjoy your last night as a fugitive, I whispered to the rim. Tomorrow you become a monument. I went inside. Sarah was waiting in the kitchen. Well, she asked, how did it go? Are we going to jail? No. I slammed the thick stack of municipal forms onto the counter. We're going to construction. She looked at the forms. Application for gift of real property to the city of Oakbridge. Jack, she said slowly, are you giving our driveway to the city? Only the bottom part, I said, pouring myself a celebratory glass of water. It's a strategic donation, a tactical retreat to higher ground. You are insane. I am motivated, I corrected. And tomorrow, things are going to get very, very loud. I spent the rest of the evening filling out Form 88B. I drew a diagram of the park. I labeled the hoop Recreational Wellness Station 1. I labeled the bench Public Seating Node A. I used every buzzword I could find in the city charter. Community engagement, youth outreach, obesity reduction. I was crafting a masterpiece of bureaucratic fiction. At midnight, I signed the final page. I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I wasn't just fighting for a hoop anymore. I was fighting for every guy who had ever been told his trash can was visible from the street. I was fighting for the soul of the suburbs. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, imagining Brenda's face when she realized that her authority had been nullified by the one thing she couldn't defeat, the government. The next morning, the sun rose over Oakbridge Estates like a spotlight on a stage. I was up at dawn. I moved the cars out of the garage and parked them on the street, legally, of course. At 7:59 a.m., a rumble shook the house. It sounded like a tank battalion was invading the cul-de-sac. I looked out the window. A massive, rusted dump truck was backing down the street. It was followed by a pickup truck that was more Bondo than steel. The pickup had a trailer, and on that trailer was a jackhammer the size of a jackhammer. Big Mike had arrived. I walked out to meet him. Mike was exactly as I imagined. 6'4", shaped like a vending machine, wearing a neon yellow vest that was fighting a losing battle against his gut. He had a cigar clamped between his teeth that was unlit. "You Jack?" he grunted, slamming the door of his truck. A cloud of dust fell off the frame. "I'm Jack." He looked at the driveway. He looked at the hoop. He looked at the street. "So," he said, gesturing with a massive hand, "you want me to cut out a chunk here, pour a commercial footer, and strip the sealer so we can paint road lines?" "Exactly. It needs to look like the city did it. But better." Mike nodded appreciatively. "And the bench?" "Bolt it down. I want it immovable." "I got some surplus anchors from a bridge job," Mike said. "That bench won't move unless the tectonic plates do." He turned to his crew, 2 guys who looked like they were made of wire and grit. "All right, boys. Fire up the saw. We're making a park." "Wait," I said. "One thing." Mike looked at me. "The HOA president lives right there." I pointed to Brenda's house. "She's going to come out. She's going to yell. She might try to stand in front of the truck." Mike grinned. It was a terrifying sight. "Boss, I've been yelled at by general contractors, structural engineers, and my own mother. A lady in a bathrobe don't scare me. As long as the check clears, I'm deaf." "The check will clear." "Then let's make some noise." Mike yanked the cord on the concrete saw. The engine roared to life, a high-pitched scream that cut through the morning silence like a knife. Vroom. Across the street, Brenda's curtains flew open. I took a sip of my coffee. It had begun. The sound of a concrete saw cutting through asphalt is not a sound you hear. It is a sound you feel. It vibrates in your molars. It rattles the windows in their frames. It is a violent, screeching tear in the fabric of suburban tranquility, and at 8:01 a.m. on a Wednesday, it was the most beautiful symphony I had ever heard. A plume of gray dust erupted from the end of my driveway, billowing up like a smoke signal of war. Big Mike was bent over the machine, guiding it with the steady hands of a surgeon, if the surgeon was 6'4" and built like a vending machine. Across the street, the front door of 125 Oakview Lane flew open with such force I thought the hinges might snap. Brenda emerged. She was not in her usual patrol uniform of floral blouse and khakis. She was in a pink terrycloth bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, clutching her chest as if she were witnessing a murder. Her hair, usually sprayed into a rigid helmet, was slightly askew, revealing the terrifying truth. Brenda slept. She didn't walk, she sprinted. She navigated the distance between her porch and my driveway with surprising speed, dodging the neighborhood cat and leaping over a sprinkler head. "Stop!" she screamed. Her voice was high and shrill, but it was swallowed whole by the vroom of the saw. She reached the edge of the driveway, or rather, the edge of the construction zone, and started waving her arms like she was trying to land a plane on an aircraft carrier. "Stop it! Stop it right now!" Mike didn't flinch. He didn't even look up. He just kept cutting, sending a shower of sparks and gravel into the air. Brenda turned to me. Her face was a shade of red that I'm pretty sure didn't exist in nature, somewhere between stop sign and aneurysm. "Jack!" she shrieked, finding a frequency that cut through the mechanical roar. "What are you doing?" I was leaning against the side of my house, holding a mug of coffee that said "World's Okayest Dad." I took a slow, deliberate sip before answering. "Morning. Brenda," I yelled over the noise. "Just doing some maintenance. Curb appeal, right?" "Maintenance? You are destroying the driveway. You are creating a nuisance. This is a violation of the noise ordinance. It is 8 a.m. City ordinance says construction can start at 7 a.m., Brenda. We gave you an extra hour out of courtesy." "Courtesy?" She looked at the dust cloud, which was now drifting toward her pristine rose bushes. She gasped. "My roses! The dust! Stop him immediately!" She lunged toward Mike, presumably to tap him on the shoulder, or perhaps tackle him. I don't know what her plan was, but she never got the chance to execute it. Mike cut the engine. The silence that followed was sudden and deafening. The birds started singing again, sounding confused. Mike stood up slowly, his spine cracking audibly. He wiped his face with a dirty rag, leaving a streak of grease across his cheek, and turned to look at the woman standing in his work zone. "Can I help you, lady?" Mike rumbled. His voice sounded like gravel tumbling down a chute. "I am Brenda Halloway," she announced, puffing out her chest. "I am the president of the Oakbridge Estates Homeowners Association, and I am ordering you to cease and desist this unauthorized construction immediately." Mike looked at her. He looked at the saw. He looked at me. Then he looked back at her. He took the unlit cigar out of his mouth. "The president, huh?" Mike said, unimpressed. "That's nice. I'm Mike. I'm the guy with the saw." "You do not have permission to be here," Brenda snapped, regaining some of her composure now that the noise had stopped. "This homeowner has not submitted an architectural review request. Any modification to the exterior of the home requires board approval. You are trespassing on a deed-restricted community." Mike sighed. It was a long, weary sigh. He reached into the back pocket of his jeans, which were covered in cement dust, and pulled out a folded, crumpled piece of paper. It was the copy of the permit I had filled out the night before. Specifically, the City of Oakbridge Public Works obstruction permit. He shook it open and held it out to her. "Lady, I don't know about your little club," Mike said, "but I'm operating under City Permit number 8842B. Mitigation of subsurface soil erosion and installation of public safety infrastructure. Pursuant to Municipal Code, Title 14. Brenda stared at the paper. She didn't take it. "Public safety infrastructure? What are you talking about? He's digging a hole." "I'm installing a footer," Mike corrected, "for a vertical cantilevered support structure." "A what?" "A pole," Mike said. "A big, heavy pole. Now I'm gonna need you to step back. You ain't wearing a hard hat, you ain't wearing steel-toed boots, and those slippers don't look ANSI-rated." "I will not step back." Brenda stepped forward, crossing onto the asphalt. "I am shutting this down. I am calling the police." Mike's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward, towering over her. "Ma'am, you are now entering an active excavation site. That is an OSHA violation. If you get hurt, that's on my insurance, and I hate paperwork." He turned to his crew, two guys named Sal and Rick who were leaning on shovels, watching the exchange with the delight of people who usually watch soap operas. "Sal!" Mike barked. "Get the cones!" Sal ran to the truck and grabbed 4 bright orange traffic cones. He slammed them down around Brenda, effectively boxing her in. "There," Mike said. "Now you're contained. Stay in the safety square or leave the property." Brenda looked at the cones. She looked at Mike. She looked at me, grinning behind my coffee mug. She was shaking with rage. "This isn't over," she hissed at me. "I am calling the board lawyers. I am calling the police. You will be fined into bankruptcy, Jack. Mark my words." "I'll be here?" I waved. She turned around, kicked one of the cones over, a petty victory, and marched back to her house. Mike watched her go, then spat on the ground. "She seems nice." She's a delight, I said. Can we make the hole deeper? Mike grinned. For her, I'll dig to China. He yanked the cord. Vroom! The next 2 days were a blur of glorious industrial chaos. Wednesday was demolition. Mike and his crew didn't just cut a hole. They surgically removed a 4x4 square of asphalt from the bottom of the driveway. Then they brought in a mini excavator. The sight of a piece of heavy machinery tracking mud across my manicured lawn would normally have given me heart palpitations. But watching it dig a crater in the exact spot where Brenda had stood lecturing me was deeply therapeutic. They dug deep, 4 feet, maybe 5. Gotta get below the frost line, Mike explained, shouting over the engine. Plus, if we use enough concrete, the only way to get this pole out will be with dynamite. Use more, I said. I'll pay for the extra bags. By Thursday afternoon, the structure arrived. It wasn't the sleek, consumer-grade hoop I had bought at Costco. That one was currently sitting in my garage, rejected. No, Mike had sourced a monster. It was a commercial-grade galvanized steel gooseneck pole, the kind you see in city parks where the game is rough and the rims are double reinforced. It was thick, gray, and ugly. It looked less like a basketball hoop and more like a piece of Cold War artillery. Where did you get this? I asked, awestruck, as they hoisted it into the wet concrete. Don't ask, Mike winked. City surplus auction. It used to be at the juvenile detention center. It's seen things. They leveled it. They plumbed it. They poured bag after bag of quikrete into the hole until it was a solid block of stone. But the pièce de résistance came on Friday. The concrete had cured. The pole was standing tall, an immovable obelisk of spite. Now came the improvements that would legally classify this patch of ground as a public road. Mike's cousin, a guy named Sketchy Pete, who apparently specialized in road striping, showed up with a machine that looked like a lawnmower crossed with a paint sprayer. What are we doing? Pete asked, looking at the driveway. Make it look like a highway, I said. Pete shrugged. He fired up the machine. He painted thick, white boundary lines along the edges of the easement, effectively cutting off the bottom 30 feet of my driveway from the rest of the property. Visually, it severed the connection to my house. Then, he did the most important part. He painted a double yellow line right down the center of the driveway entrance, splitting the court into 2 lanes. It looked ridiculous. It looked like a very short, very wide road that abruptly ended at my garage door. Perfect, I whispered. We ain't done, Mike said. He walked over to the side of the easement, where the grass met the asphalt. The bench. Sal and Rick hauled a heavy metal park bench out of the truck. It was one of those indestructible, thermoplastic-coated benches you see at bus stops. It was bright green. They drilled holes into the existing driveway border and bolted the bench down. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. The impact wrench sang the song of permanence. And finally, I said, producing the item I had picked up from Stan at City Hall earlier that morning. It was a sign. A legitimate, reflective, green metal street sign on a U-channel post. Mike pounded the post into the ground right next to the mailbox. I bolted the sign to the top. City of Oak Bridge Public Recreation Area, 42. Open dawn to dusk. No overnight parking. We stepped back to admire our work. It was hideous. It was beautiful. The driveway was no longer a driveway. It was a Frankenstein's monster of municipal code compliance. The black asphalt, the stark white and yellow lines, the industrial gray pole, the green bench, and the official signage. It clashed violently with the beige stucco and manicured hydrangeas of the house. It stood out like a sore thumb that had been hit with a hammer and then painted neon yellow. It's the ugliest thing I've ever built, Mike said, wiping his hands on his pants. I love it. How much do I owe you? I asked. Mike did some math on a dirty notepad. Materials, labor, excavator rental, permit fees. And the annoyance tax for dealing with the lady in the bathrobe. Call it $4,000. I'll write you a check for $5,000. Mike grinned. Pleasure doing business with you, Jack. As Mike's crew was packing up the cones and loading the excavator back onto the trailer, I saw the curtains across the street move again. Brenda had been watching. Of course she had. She had probably been keeping a log of every noise, every speck of dust, every violation. She had waited for us to finish. She wanted the crime to be complete before she called in the cavalry. I stood on the newly painted public road, bouncing the basketball. Thump, thump, swish, the rim was stiff. It clanged loudly. It was perfect. I looked at my watch. 4:45 p.m. Leo, I yelled toward the house. Get your shoes, the park is open. Leo came running out. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the driveway. His jaw dropped. Dad, he whispered. What is that? That, I said, pointing to the yellow line, is freedom, son. That is the sweet, sweet taste of malicious compliance. It looks like a parking lot. It's a thoroughfare, Leo. Respect the infrastructure. Can we play? Absolutely. We started shooting around. The ball echoed off the pavement. The industrial pole didn't wobble a millimeter when the ball hit the rim. It was solid as a rock. 10 minutes later, the inevitable happened. A police cruiser turned the corner. It wasn't speeding. It was cruising slowly, patrolling. But as soon as it came into view, Brenda's front door opened. She didn't run this time. She walked with the grim determination of an executioner. She stood at the edge of her lawn and flagged the car down. The cruiser stopped. The window rolled down. I held the ball. Here we go. Just keep shooting, I told Leo. Don't say anything. Let me do the talking. The officer stepped out of the car. He was young, clean-shaven, looking a bit bored. His name tag read Miller. He adjusted his belt, looked at Brenda, looked at me, and then looked at the driveway. His eyebrows shot up. Officer! Brenda cried out, her voice trembling with righteous victimhood. Thank God you're here. I want to report a crime. Officer Miller walked over to her. What seems to be the problem, ma'am? Vandalism. She pointed a shaking finger at me. Illegal construction, zoning violations, disturbing the peace, and she paused for dramatic effect. Operating an unlicensed commercial sports facility in a residential zone. Officer Miller blinked. A commercial sports facility? Look at it! She screamed, sweeping her arm toward my driveway. There are road lines, there is a bench, there is a sign. He has turned his driveway into a circus. Officer Miller turned to me. He walked slowly across the street, his boots crunching on the loose gravel left over from the construction. Sir? Miller said. I tucked the basketball under my arm and walked to the edge of the yellow line. Afternoon, officer. Can I help you? This lady seems pretty upset about your renovation, Miller said, gesturing vaguely at the yellow paint. Do you have a permit for all this? I do, I said. I walked over to the park bench, public seating node A, where I had placed a thick, black binder labeled Site Documentation. I picked up the binder and handed it to him. Officer, there seems to be a misunderstanding, I said, projecting my voice so Brenda could hear. I haven't renovated my driveway. I have simply facilitated the improvement of City Easement B4. Miller opened the binder. The first page was the deed of transfer, stamped with the official seal of the city clerk. What is this? Miller asked, reading the header. That is a donation receipt, I explained. As of the city council vote last night, this 30 by 20 foot strip of land is no longer my property. It is the property of the city of Oakbridge, designated as a public recreation area. Miller looked up from the paper. He looked at the green sign. City of Oakbridge, Public Recreation Area, 42B. You gave your driveway to the city?" Miller asked, a look of genuine confusion crossing his face. "I did, for the children, officer. For the community." Brenda had crept closer. She was listening. Her face was losing its color, draining from red to a sickly, pale white. "That's a lie," she shouted. "He's lying. It's his house. He pays the mortgage." "Officer," I said calmly, "please turn to tab 3, the GIS survey." Miller flipped the page. He looked at the map. He saw the highlighted easement. He saw the city stamp. "Well," Miller muttered, "I'll be damned." "It's a public park, officer," I said. "Just like the one downtown. I'm just the volunteer caretaker. I water the asphalt." Miller looked at Brenda. "Ma'am, he's right. These are official city documents. This land, well, it ain't his. It belongs to the town." "That is impossible," Brenda screeched. "The HOA covenants, Article 4, no structures on private lots." "That's the key, ma'am," Officer Miller said, closing the binder. "It's not a private lot. It's public property. Your HOA rules stop at the property line. This," he tapped the toe of his boot on the yellow line, "this is technically a city street." Brenda made a sound like a tea kettle boiling over. But it looks hideous. It drives down property values. You have to tear it down." "I can't tear down city property, ma'am," Miller said, shrugging. "That would be vandalism of government infrastructure. Actually, if you try to tear it down, I'd have to arrest you." The silence that followed was heavy. I smiled at Brenda. It was a genuine smile this time. "Officer," I said, "since you're here, I'd like to point out a safety hazard." "What's that?" I pointed to Brenda's golf cart. She had parked it on the curb, with 2 wheels resting on the newly painted white line of the easement. "That vehicle is partially blocking a public thoroughfare," I said, citing the code I had memorized at 3 a.m. Obstruction of a recreational access point. Municipal Code 11C. Officer Miller looked at the golf cart. He looked at Brenda. He looked back at me, and I saw a twinkle in his eye. He was enjoying this. "He's right, ma'am," Miller said. "You're blocking the entrance to the park. I'm going to have to ask you to move your vehicle immediately, or I'll have to write a citation." Brenda looked as if she had been slapped. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked at the ugly gray pole. She looked at the yellow lines. She looked at the officer. Defeated, she turned around. She walked to her golf cart, her slippers scuffling on the pavement. She got in, reversed it into her own driveway, and slammed the garage door shut. Officer Miller watched her go, then turned back to me. He handed me the binder. "You really went the distance on this one, didn't you?" he asked. "She fined me $500, officer." Miller chuckled. He looked at the hoop. "Commercial grade rim?" "Double reinforced." "Nice," Miller said. "I get off shift at 6. Maybe I'll swing by. I haven't played 3-on-3 in years." "The park is open to the public, officer. We'd love to have you." He tipped his cap, got back in his cruiser, and drove away. I turned to Leo. He was staring at me with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Did you just get the police to tell Brenda to go away?" Leo asked. "I sure did, kid." "And did we just win?" "The battle?" I said, looking at the empty street where Brenda had stood. "Yes, but the war? The war is just getting started." I spun the ball on my finger. "Now," I said, "let's see if this public park can handle a dunk." I drove to the lane, jumped, and slammed the ball through the net. The heavy steel pole didn't even shudder. The sound, clang, rang out across the neighborhood like a church bell. Across the street, Brenda's blinds twitched. I knew she was in there. I knew she was plotting, but I also knew something she didn't. Tomorrow was Saturday, and I had just boosted a Facebook post for the first annual Freedom from HOAs basketball tournament. If she thought one ball was loud, she had no idea what 20 of them sounded like. If Friday was the victory, Saturday was the parade. I woke up at 6 a.m., buzzing with an energy that was equal parts caffeine and vindication. I didn't need an alarm clock. I had the internal rhythm of a man who was about to host the most legally compliant, bureaucratically sanctioned nuisance in the history of the suburbs. I walked to the window. The sun was just cresting over the rooftops of Oak Bridge Estates. The park, my former driveway, was bathed in golden light. The yellow lines gleamed. The green bench looked inviting. The massive gray pole stood like a sentinel. It was quiet. Too quiet. "Jack," Sarah mumbled from under the duvet. "Why are you up? It's Saturday." "Today is the big day, honey," I said, pulling on my commissioner t-shirt. I had ironed on the letters myself the night before. "The first annual Freedom from HOA's 3-on-3 tournament." "Please tell me nobody is actually coming," Sarah groaned, rolling over. "Please tell me this is just you and Leo and Big Mike eating hot dogs." I checked my phone. The Facebook event page had blown up overnight. It had been shared in the Oak Bridge Moms group, scandalous, the local pickup basketball group, enthusiastic, and the petty revenge subreddit, legendary. "We have 16 teams registered," I said, "and a wait list." 16 teams? Jack, where are they going to park? "On the street," I grinned. "It's a public road. First come, first served." By 8:30 a.m., Oakview Lane looked less like a quiet cul-de-sac and more like the parking lot of a Fish concert. The cars lined the street on both sides, bumper to bumper. There were beat-up sedans, lifted trucks, and one pristine BMW that I recognized as belonging to a lawyer from 3 streets over who hated Brenda as much as I did. I walked out to the garage, which I had converted into Tournament HQ. I had a folding table, a cooler filled with Gatorade, and a bracket drawn on a massive piece of poster board. Big Mike was already there. He had backed his truck onto the lawn. Technically my lawn, so the HOA couldn't tow him, and had set up a grill on his tailgate. "Morning, commish," Mike bellowed, flipping a sausage with a pair of rusty tongs. "I brought the supplies, bratwurst, burgers, and enough ice to freeze a mammoth." "Mike, you're an artist," I said. "I also brought an air horn," Mike added, holding up a red can, "for the buzzer beaters." "Excellent." The players started gathering. It was a motley crew. There was Team Habeas Corpus, the lawyers, 3 teenagers in matching neon jerseys who looked like they played varsity, and a group of dads in cargo shorts calling themselves the Arthritic Avengers. The noise level began to rise. Basketballs were thumping. People were laughing. Music was playing from a Bluetooth speaker, classic 90s hip-hop, loud enough to be festive, but I checked my decibel meter, just under the 65 decibel limit for a residential zone. At 9 a.m. sharp, I grabbed the megaphone. "Gentlemen, welcome to Constitution Court." A cheer went up. "Ground rules," I shouted. "This is a single elimination tournament. Games are to 11. Call your own fouls, but if you argue for more than 30 seconds, Big Mike will disqualify you." Mike waved his tongs menacingly. "Also," I continued, pointing across the street, "that house is the residence of our beloved HOA president, Brenda. If the ball goes into her yard, do not, I repeat, do not, step on her grass to retrieve it. It is a minefield. Use the pool skimmer provided." I held up a long-handled pool net I had purchased specifically for this purpose. "Let the games begin." I blew a whistle. The first game tipped off. It was the lawyers versus the teenagers. The lawyers were surprisingly aggressive, setting screens that bordered on assault. The teenagers were faster, but they lacked the sheer, pent-up rage of corporate attorneys on a weekend. Thump, thump, swish, grunt. It was beautiful. And then the curtains moved. I had been waiting for it. I knew Brenda wouldn't sleep through this. She couldn't. Her spidey sense for unauthorized joy was too attuned. The front door of 125 Oak View Lane opened. Brenda stepped out. She was dressed for battle today. Khaki slacks, a stiff polo shirt tucked in with military precision, and oversized sunglasses. She carried the clipboard, but she also carried a phone, which she was already speaking into with frantic urgency. She didn't come over immediately. She stood on her porch, surveying the scene like a general watching the barbarians crest the hill. She saw the cars. She saw the grill. She saw the people. She saw the sign. City of Oakbridge, public recreation area. She marched down her walkway. She stopped at the edge of the street. She didn't cross. She knew better now. She knew the pavement was no longer her domain. "Jack!" she screamed. The music drowned her out. She took a deep breath and screamed louder. "Jack!" I hit pause on the speaker. The sudden silence was jarring. All eyes turned to her. "Good morning, Brenda," I said into the megaphone. "Care to join a team? We have an opening on the Karen-nators." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. "This is an illegal gathering," she shouted, her voice shaking. "You are blocking traffic. You are creating a public nuisance. I have called the police, the fire marshal, and the towing company." I walked over to the edge of the yellow line, holding my own clipboard. "Actually, Brenda," I said, flipping a page, "according to City Ordinance 12C, a public assembly in a residential zone only requires a permit if the attendance exceeds 50 people. I have a clicker counter right here." I held it up. "We are currently at 46 people. We are 4 people short of a permit requirement." "That is a lie," she pointed at the crowd. "There are hundreds of people here." "Count them," I challenged. "Go ahead, we'll wait." She scanned the crowd, her lips moving silently. She got to the group of teenagers. You don't live here. You are trespassing." "Public park, ma'am," one of the kids said, spinning the ball on his finger. "Taxpayer funded. I bought a gumball yesterday, so I contributed." "And the cars," she pivoted. "You cannot turn the street into a parking lot." "Street parking is legal on Oakview Lane unless marked otherwise," I cited. "And since the HOA refused to pay for no parking signs last year to save money, well, here we are." Brenda was vibrating. She looked like she was about to explode. "I will not have this. This is a quiet neighborhood. You are attracting elements." "Elements?" Big Mike shouted from the grill. "Lady, that sounds like chemistry. I failed chemistry. I just cook meat." "You," she pointed at Mike. "You are operating a commercial food service without a health department rating." "I ain't selling it," Mike yelled back. "I'm giving it away. It's a potluck. You want a burger? It might calm you down." "I do not want your grease-laden poison." Just then, a siren wailed. Brenda smiled. It was a terrifying, triumphant smile. "Ah, the authorities." A police car turned the corner, but it wasn't Officer Miller's cruiser. It was an SUV. Sergeant. The vehicle stopped. A large man with a shaved head and sunglasses got out. He looked serious. He looked like the kind of cop who didn't find loopholes funny. "Officers!" Brenda yelled, running toward him. "Arrest them, all of them, rioting, unlawful assembly." The sergeant held up a hand. "Ma'am, stay back." He walked over to me. The crowd went silent. The fun was over. This was the part where the hammer dropped. "Are you the organizer?" the sergeant asked, his voice flat. "I am, Sergeant Jack. This is a community wellness event." "I've received 6 calls in the last hour," the sergeant said. "From one number." He glanced at Brenda. "Noise complaints, traffic obstruction, operating an illegal casino." Casino? I blinked. She said there was gambling, the sergeant said deadpan. There's a bracket, Sergeant. No money is changing hands. The prize is pride. I mentally decided to hide the $500 cash envelope in my pocket. The sergeant looked at the hoop. He looked at the yellow lines. He looked at the sign. This the driveway everyone at the station is talking about? He asked. It is, I said. Officer Miller processed the paperwork. Yeah, Miller won't shut up about it. The sergeant took off his sunglasses. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the grill. Is that open flames on a public roadway? He asked, pointing at Mike. Technically, the grill is on the bed of a truck, I said quickly, which is parked on private property, my lawn. The smoke is merely drifting into the public airspace. The sergeant stared at me. It was an agonizing 5 seconds. Then, the corner of his mouth twitched. Make sure the music stays down, he said, and keep the street passable for emergency vehicles. If a fire truck can't get through, I'm towing everyone. Understood, Sergeant. We'll have someone direct traffic. He turned to Brenda. She was practically vibrating with anticipation, waiting for the handcuffs to come out. Ma'am, the sergeant said. Yes, take him away. Ma'am, you need to stop calling 911. Unless someone is bleeding or the house is on fire, do not call again. Misuse of the emergency system is a misdemeanor. If I have to come back here for a basketball game, you're the one getting a ticket. Brenda gasped. It was a sound like a vacuum seal breaking. Me? But the noise. It's Saturday, Mom. People are allowed to be outside. Have a nice day. He got back in his SUV and drove off. The crowd erupted. It wasn't just a cheer, it was a roar of victory. Big Mike blasted the air horn. Biwabe, bois, bois. Brenda stood there, frozen. She looked at the retreating police car. She looked at the cheering crowd. She looked at me. Her face crumpled. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She just turned around, walked back into her house, and slammed the door. Then, we heard the distinct sound of the deadbolt sliding home. Game on, I yelled. The tournament raged for hours. It was glorious. The sun beat down, the sweat flew, and the level of play was surprisingly high. The lawyers, fueled by years of repressed anger, actually made it to the semifinals before losing to the teenagers. Team Arthritic Avengers pulled a hamstring in the first round and spent the rest of the day icing their knees and drinking Mike's special sodas. Leo played on a team with 2 neighborhood kids. They lost in the first round, but he scored a basket. A real, actual basket on a public court that his dad built out of spite. The look on his face, pure, unadulterated pride, was worth every penny of the $4,000 I owed Mike. As the afternoon wore on, the shadows lengthened. The crowd started to thin out, but the core group remained. The final game was set. The teenagers versus the Freedom Ballers, a team of off-duty firefighters who had shown up late but dominated the paint. The sun dipped below the horizon. It's getting dark, Commish, Mike yelled. Call the game? Not yet, I said. We play until the final buzzer. We can't see the rim, one of the firefighters said. Ah, I smiled. Allow me. I walked over to the side of the garage. Mike, hit the switch. Mike reached into the electrical box we had mounted on the side of the pole. Click. The floodlight turned on. Now, when I say floodlight, I don't mean a gentle porch light. I mean a 50,000 lumen industrial-grade LED stadium light that Mike had acquired from a parking lot demolition. It hummed to life with the intensity of a collapsing sun. The court was instantly bathed in a light so bright you could perform surgery on the asphalt. Whoa! The kids yelled, shielding their eyes. That's bright! Safety first, I declared. But there was a secondary function to this light. a function I had carefully calculated with a protractor and a laser pointer 3 days ago. The light was angled at 45 degrees. It illuminated the court perfectly. But the spillover, the cone of light that missed the court, traveled directly across the street. It cut through the darkness like a lightsaber. It bypassed the trees, it bypassed the hedges, and it landed, with mathematical precision, squarely on the master bedroom window of 125 Oakview Lane. Brenda's window. I saw the curtains across the street instantly glow white, as if a UFO had landed on her lawn. "Play ball!" I yelled. The game finished under the artificial sun. The firefighters won, size advantage, and I handed them the envelope of cash. "Donate it," the captain said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Buy some more hot dogs for the next one." "You got it." People began to pack up. The cars started to leave. The noise died down. Mike was scraping the grill. "Hell of a day, Jack, hell of a day." "The best, Mike." "You keeping the light on?" Mike asked, looking at the beam that was currently X-raying Brenda's house. "The sign says open dawn to dusk," I mused. "But public safety is paramount. I think we need to leave the security light on. You know, to deter crime." "To deter crime," Mike nodded solemnly. "Good call." I walked Leo inside. He was exhausted, dirty, and happy. "Dad," he said, collapsing onto the couch, "that was awesome." "Yeah, it was." "Is Brenda gonna move?" I laughed. "I don't know, kid, but I think she's going to invest in blackout curtains." I went to the kitchen window and looked out. The court was empty now. The yellow lines were silent. But the light was steady. It was a beacon. I grabbed a beer and sat on the porch. I watched the light. 10 minutes later, I saw movement across the street. Brenda's front door opened. She stepped out, shielding her eyes against the glare. She looked like a vampire caught in the sun. She stared at the light. She stared at me. I raised my beer in a silent toast. She went back inside. A moment later, I saw the lights in her house go off. But her bedroom window remained glowing, a square of brilliant white light in the darkness. I took a sip. This wasn't just a win. This was a dynasty. The following Tuesday was the monthly HOA board meeting. Usually these meetings were attended by Brenda, the treasurer, a man named Gary who was afraid of his own shadow, and maybe 1 or 2 board residents who wanted to complain about squirrel populations. This time the community center parking lot was full. Word of the Constitution Court victory had spread. The neighbors, the ones who had been silently suffering under Brenda's tyranny for years, hiding their trash cans and measuring their grass with rulers, smelled blood in the water. I walked in with Sarah. We took seats in the front row. Big Mike was there, leaning against the back wall. He didn't even live in the neighborhood. He just came for the show. He was eating popcorn out of a bag. Brenda sat at the head table. She looked tired. Her hair was slightly less rigid than usual. She wore dark circles under her eyes, probably because her bedroom was currently illuminated like a 7-Eleven parking lot. She banged her gavel. It sounded weak. "Order," she said. "The meeting will come to order." "Motion to suspend the agenda," shouted Mr. Henderson from the third row. He was a retired Marine who had been fined last year for having an American flag that was too large. "Seconded," yelled Mrs. Gable, fined for a bird feeder. "You cannot suspend the agenda," Brenda stammered. "We have to discuss the landscaping budget. We want to discuss the legal budget." I stood up. The room went quiet. Brenda looked at me. Her lip quivered. "Jack," she said, "sit down." "Madam President," I said, holding up a piece of paper, "I have here the financial disclosures for the last quarter. It appears that last week..." The board authorized a $5,000 retainer for a law firm to investigate title disputes regarding Lot 12B. A gasp went through the room. "You spent $5,000 of our money to try and steal my driveway back from the city?" I asked. "I was protecting community assets," Brenda shrilled. "You gave away our land. You brought chaos to our streets." "I brought a park," I corrected, "and the city isn't giving it back. I spoke to Stan in planning today. They're thinking of adding a swing set next spring." Laughter rippled through the room. "You wasted our funds on a personal vendetta," I continued, my voice hardening. "And you lost. You embarrassed this association. And frankly, you're annoying the police department." "I move for a vote of no confidence," Mr. Henderson shouted. "Second," said Gary, the treasurer. Brenda turned to look at Gary. "Et tu, Gary?" "I want to put up a shed, Brenda," Gary whispered. "I've always wanted a shed." The vote was unanimous. Brenda Halloway was removed as president of the Oakbridge Estates HOA effective immediately. She didn't make a scene. She didn't scream. She just gathered her papers, stood up, and walked out the side door. As she passed Big Mike, he offered her some popcorn. She declined. I was elected interim president by default. My first act? I abolished Article 4, Section 9. My second act? I forgave all outstanding fines. Section 6. Conclusion. It has been 6 months since the Great Driveway donation. Life in Oakbridge Estates has changed. It's a little louder now. On weekends, the sound of basketballs echoes through the cul-de-sac. Sometimes, I have to wait for a game to finish before I can pull my car into the garage. I don't mind. I usually roll down the window and heckle their jump shots. "Elbow in, Jimmy. Use the glass." The park has become a local landmark. The city actually sends a crew to sweep it once a week. They even plowed it when it snowed last February. I have the only taxpayer-funded heated driveway maintenance in the county. Brenda put her house on the market a month after the coup. She couldn't handle the noise, or the shame, or the floodlight, which I graciously turned off. Eventually, she moved to a condo complex in the next town over. I heard it's a 55 and older community with strict noise ordinances and a very aggressive board. She's probably happier there, or at least she has a whole new group of people to terrorize. As for me, I'm currently sitting on the bench. My bench, public seating node A, drinking a cold beer. Leo is playing one-on-one with the neighbor's kid. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the yellow lines. Big Mike's truck pulls up. He honks the horn. "Yo, Jack," he yells. "I got a surplus slide from a playground job. You think the city wants to expand the park?" I look at the empty patch of grass next to the driveway. I look at the official city sign. "Mike," I smile. "I think that's a fantastic idea. Some people see a driveway. Some people see a tax loophole. Me? I see a monument to the indomitable human spirit, and a really, really good place to work on my free throws. Swish!